morning. Hope you're doing well wherever you're at watching this. Hopefully everybody's healthy and safe. We're continuing our study on Hebrews chapter 11, the Hall of Faith. We've gone through many individual people, and this morning we're going to talk about a group of people. The same people group two different times in Scriptures. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 29 through 30 reads like this. By faith, the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land. But the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. Two different people groups. First, the Israelites coming out of slavery in Egypt, found in the book of Exodus, and the army of Israel, led by Joshua, fighting the Battle of Jericho. Or, if we go by the old song, fit the Battle of Jericho. I've never really understood what that means to fit the Battle of Jericho, but that's a topic for another day. I won't delve into that. The people of Israel. It tells us in Exodus chapter 14, they come to the Red Sea. We talked last week about Moses leading the people of Israel out of Egypt. Let my people go, and finally Pharaoh lets them go. And they travel along after they finally are set free. And they get to the Red Sea. And Moses holds out his staff. And he parts the Red Sea, and it tells us in Exodus chapter 14 that the people of Israel passed by on dry land. That it wasn't muddy, it wasn't soggy, there wasn't water on the ground, it was dry. They passed through and they got to the other side, and as soon as the last Israelite crossed over and Moses dropped his arm, the waters, they came back over the top. They receded. They went back to normal. The kicker in all this is the Egyptian army was traveling after him, was following him, was hunting him down. Pharaoh had finally had enough and let him go, but as soon as they got out, he said, you know what, forget that. We need them back. I've changed my mind. And his army was in the midst of the dry ground. They were out on the Red Sea where the Israelites had just passed. And when the water come down on top of them, it crushed them all and took out Pharaoh's army and spared the Israelites. And the Israelites got over there and they praised God and they worshiped God and thanked Him for being with them. And the miracles that they saw with the plagues and how they were spared and all of that throughout the book of Exodus. And then we reach this point and they've got to be in awe of how great and powerful God is. That literally He split the Red Sea. He was so powerful. He held the waters back for them to pass by. And they worshipped Him and they praised His name. Joshua took over after Moses passed away. And he led the people of Israel. And he was a great warrior, a great leader, and a great man of God. And he led the people many times into battle. And he was always victorious because he kept God at the forefront of his actions, but also the actions of his army and his nation. He led them the way they needed to be led. And in Joshua chapter 6, we find what the author of Hebrews is talking about here. The Battle of Jericho. He fought the Battle of Jericho. But actually Joshua and the people of Israel didn't do anything. God did. See, they come to the city walls of Jericho and God tells Joshua, here's what I want you to do. Each day, march around the city walls. You and your army. Don't make a sound. Don't do anything out of the ordinary. Just march. And they did. Day after day. And then finally on the last day, God said, on this last day, I want you to march around. And after you get done marching around, I want you to make a racket. I want you to bust clay pots. I want you to blow the horns. I want you to shake the tambourines. I want you to dance and scream and shout. Because it's on that moment, at that moment, God, your God, is going to deliver Jericho into your hands. And they did, and they saw the mighty force of God as their enemies were defeated without them lifting a single sword, without them pulling back up one bow. God is amazing. And when God's people follow Him, they can do immeasurable things. They can do all that you can ever imagine. They're powerful because God is their leader. But there's a problem. We tend to turn away from God. We tend to leave God behind. I know best, or he knows best, or she knows best, or this leader knows how we need to do things, and we follow them instead of following God. This nation is one of those nations. I love America. The United States of America, in my opinion, is the greatest country in the history of the world. It was founded on the principles of this book. Now, it was founded by men who were infallible. They made mistakes. They sinned. They had a whole lot of failures that they didn't understand and didn't recognize. But the bottom line was this. They were right in following God. The world right now is in a crazy place. You can't turn on the news without seeing some type of horrific action going on somewhere. It's not a black, a white, brown, yellow, pink, purple, whatever color. It's not those issues. The issue is we've turned our back on God. We've taken what's in this book and we've forgotten it. And this is nothing new. It's not anything out of the ordinary. In fact, Solomon in his words said there's nothing new under the sun. And that's the case with nations. And the United States is a prime example of that. We've turned our back on God and His teaching and His leading. And if we want to get back to any resemblance of who we are as a nation, we need to turn back to that. We need to follow His leading, not ours. Not Trump's, not Biden's, not Obama's, not Clinton's. None of those. Not even Washington or Lincoln. We need to follow the teachings of Jehovah, the God of Israel, the God that led the Israelites out of slavery, parted the Red Sea. We need to follow the God of Israel, the God of Joshua that stood there and said, you march around the city and I'm going to destroy it and give it to your hands without you ever doing anything about it. That's where we need to turn our hope to. But we shouldn't beat ourselves up, because the nation of Israel did the same thing we did. Exodus chapter 14, God parts the Red Sea and He leads the Israelites by day with fire in the sky, or a cloud in the sky, and at night by fire in the sky. Leads them all over the place and gets them to the mountain. And Moses goes up to the mountain in Exodus chapter 20. In Exodus chapter 20, Moses goes on top of the mountain and he gets the 10 Commandments from God. The rules, the regulations, the laws, how we should sacrifice, how we should do this, how we should do that. God's instructions are given to Moses on the mountain. Now, this is just a few days after they parted the Red Sea, after they saw all the miracles in Egypt. They saw how powerful God was. And they said, you know what, Moses has been up on that mountain for too long. He's dead. He's forgotten us. We're on our own. We should have just stayed in Egypt. And then they made a golden calf. A little baby cow. Said, this is the God that brought us out of Egypt and saved us. They melted down all their gold and they built this calf and they worshipped it and they praised it. And Moses came down off the mountain and he saw this and he's like, what in the world? What do you think? And he took the commandments and he slammed them down. This is all in Exodus chapter 32. Moses is distraught. These people that saw the power of God, yet just in a few days turned their back on Him and created a statue to worship, an idol to worship, and said, this is our God? Are you kidding me? Joshua fights the battle of Jericho. The people are victorious because of the leading of God, and they follow Him, and they make monuments and memorials to remember how great God is and what He's done for them. But not long after Joshua, we have prophets that had nothing else to say to them but turn back to God. You're a corrupt generation. Jeremiah, throughout all his book and his teachings and his dealings with the people of Israel, does nothing but cry out to them of turn back to God. This nation that saw how great and powerful God was, so soon they forgot. But yet they're listed in the Hall of Faith. We too can be there. We too can be listed where those people are. If we turn back to God. If we rely on Him. If we lean on His leading and His following and forget about our path and our way. Proverbs chapter 3, 5, and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge Him in all your ways and He will make your path straight. Second Chronicles tells us a very simple verse. 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 14 says, if my people who are led by my name will humble themselves and turn back to me, I will lead them and I will guide them. If we would humble ourselves and bow down before God and say, I have messed up. Your rules are simple and I jacked it up. He'll lead us if we humble ourselves and say, you know what, you're God and I'm not. The prophet Amos 5:4, one of my favorite verses in all the Bible, says, hear, O Israel, seek God and live. That's the only way we can live. That's the only way we can survive as a nation, as a church, as individuals. Is your life messed up? Do you have issue after issue? Do you have struggles going on daily, moment by moment? Do you have mornings where you just don't want to get out of bed because life is that cruddy? Have you sought God? Have you turned to Him? Have you followed Him? Actually giving up your life for Him? You know, in John chapter 14, Jesus tells His disciples He's going to prepare a way for them. And we've talked about this before. And Thomas said, we don't know how to get to where you're going. How do we know? And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. There's only one way we make it to heaven. There's only one way we survive. There's only one way that we become who we're supposed to be. God's chosen people. And that's if we turn to Him. And when we turn to Him, watch out. There's going to be great things happening. There's going to be great moments happening because God will be leading us. In the words of Bachman Turner Overdrive, baby, you ain't seen nothing yet. God has a paradise prepared for us in heaven. And I can't wait to get there. And I can't wait to share that joy of praising His name and worshiping Him with all of you there in heaven, in His glory, in His presence. But I also want to do it here on this earth with you. And the only way we're going to do that is if we turn to Him. And we follow His leading, and His teaching, and His guiding. I said earlier that we have a problem of sin here in this earth, which is completely accurate. But the biggest sin is this. We've forgotten the rules. We've forgotten what God commanded us. Matthew chapter 22, the teachers of the law gathered around and said, Teacher, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second one is just like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. He says, all the law hinges on these two commands. So I challenge you, as a neighbor, a friend, a fellow American, a fellow citizen of this world, wherever you may be, seek God and live. Turn to Him. Humble yourself. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And for crying out loud, treat your neighbor as yourself. It's not complicated. It's not hard. We are all one family. Dysfunctional, but we're a family. Turn to Him. Hope you have a great week. I'll see See you back next week.